So this is going to be a little video on how to make the loops on the hook, and there's 3 of them. Here's the front hook, the back hook, and the belly hook. And what's happening right now is there's a wire, they call it a through wire, goes from the front to the back, and then there's a little clip that looks like this that connects the loop to the wire. So let's go ahead and make our first loop. They should look like this when you're done, roughly. I've improved my way a little bit, so it'll look a little different than that. So what you do, I use a pair of wire pliers, and I go down about 6 inches, and I bend down, and then I pull it all the way around. Now, this loop is way too big right now. So what I do is I put it in a vise and I shrink it a little bit. And then what I can do is now I can bring this wire back. Now, you can see this poor distorted thing. It's anything but flat and it's anything but round, but it's where we start. So we tighten in the vise, and we use a good quality pair of pliers to bring this back in line with each other, the top one and the bottom one. So now you can see that is starting to look like a loop. You can tell very well that it is not round, and we're going to be doing something to fix that here pretty quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the vise, and we're going to go a little farther down than you would think, and then we're going to squish this thing together like this and clamp it in place. Alright, then we're going to take this side and bring it down, and we're going to do the wraparound. Now, I'm pretty sure that one wrap around here would do. There's not a lot of Wahoo that carry screwdrivers in their pocket or vices, so this is 3/32 inch stainless steel material, so it's very, very strong. So I usually give it 1.5 to 2 wraps, and I have a very good set of German snippers here. And the reason you need these good ones is now you got to cut this tail end off. You got to get right in there, and you try and do that with a standard set of cutters. It just ain't going to happen. There we go. So that's what our loop is looking like right now. This part here is a little farther down. Inside the lure we'll have plenty of room. But now I have a very special tool that I got from a friend. It's a 3-dimensional cone, and we're going to be using that cone to force this stainless steel into being round. So I'm going to put it in my 4-inch vise. Okay, so we're back again, and here's what the loop looks like right now. And I'm going to put it on top of this cone. I'm going to start out with a smaller socket. This one is, I don't know, 5/16. I'm going to use a hammer to make it into a circle. Now once it gets big enough, we can use a larger socket. These are deep sockets. This is just happens to be a 12mm. Alright. Now you will notice that that's starting to look a lot rounder. And let's get rid of this guy. This is actually a tool out of a Milwaukee tool for bonding plastic pipe. but I suspect there are others available. So then I'm going to pinch this a little bit just to bring it back. And now this is when you can start to straighten things up. You look how the loop is to the wire, and you can get everything nice and straight. You'll need that later when you're actually installing it in a hook. So this is what you've got now. Okay, so this is how this small piece fits onto the main line. Now this is going to get bent up for our lure, but we're not quite ready to do that. So what happens normally is you will bend this piece back. See how it's at a bit of an angle back this way? We're going to bend that back and open up this loop a little bit so it can clip over, which it won't right now. That just shows you how tough it is. You can expand that a little bit. Well, now you can clip it over, and then when you're ready to glue the two halves of the lure back together again, you're going to get this in there and you're going to give it a pinch. So no fish in this world is going to be able to get that out. So this whole through wire thing is in case of the wooden body of the lure disintegrating. You will still have the front loop, you will still have the back loop and this middle loop, and you might end up reeling in your fish and the body is completely gone, but it will still be connected to the hooks and to the line. It won't get away because the hook disintegrates, the wooden part of it. Anyway, so this is how you make that center loop. You make your standard loop, just like I showed you before, and then you'll custom measure this distance here to the hook that you're making, and say it's here. Let's just guess that it's going to be here. So what we do is we make a bend. Bring it all the way around. We get our fancy German cutters and we cut it. And then we use our trusty vise to squeeze it down. Now one thing we need to do is, as we're squeezing it, we need to set a screwdriver in there, otherwise it'll just pinch that first and it won't pinch the tip. So kind of like this. That's what you don't necessarily want. So you gotta re-grab it every once in a while and give it a couple more grunts with the vise and try your line. And now that's a little bit too much. So what we're going to do, it should be tight, is we're going to clamp this in and we're going to work on that a little bit. So we're going to do this. Bend that out a little bit. We're also going to bend this straight with the rest of the line, the wire. And then we're going to bend it back a bit so the center line of the loop here lines up, because it's got to go through a piece of straight stainless steel. So it's got to be pulled back a little bit. So that looks pretty darn good. So let's take it out. And so by the time you get to this point, you'll have a loop on this end and another loop on this end. So there's no opportunity to stick it through like this. So you've got to go over top. So you do that and you do a bit of a test fit, and when it's good, you pinch this thing on here. Now you might say to yourself, well, how on earth is that going to stop a big Wahoo from bending this wire straight? Well, this stainless steel wire has really good strength, I doubt that 3 people could bend this by hand without tools. So that's the center loop. So after I've got both halves scooped out properly at the desired weight, we're ready to put in the stainless steel. So I use this stainless steel wire as a guideline, and I put it in that slot that I made with the saw, and now I'm going to use that to help me put in the wire. So I line it up approximately, and then I mark it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend that to match this angle. So here you can see I've made that bend. Have to be a little careful. That's where the mark was, but there's a sort of a minimum bend radius of the stainless steel wire, and it's very easy to mess up and have the wire down here or up there. So after a bit of practice you can figure out how in fact to get that mark right on the corner, which is where you want it. So now what I'm going to do, I'm ready for the tail loop, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but not very much. So I'm going to put another mark right here, and you want the loop to be on this side. So none of the loop making can be farther to the right than that. So anything I do, it'll have to be onto the left side of that, and then I'm going to hollow out that tail a little bit to make it fit. Okay, so now that the inside of both lures has been scooped out and measured to make them both equal, you add the stainless steel through wire. Now this loop is identical to the loops I showed you how to make on a previous video, and as I did in another video, I do this loop first. I put the rear loop in, mark it, make the loop, and then I have to adjust the wood a little bit to make it fit in properly. Now I do that to both sides. And then I'm ready to tackle the center loop. So this is what I do with the center loop. The center loop is designed to clip in like this. And what you do, you'll put that in, and you may remember when we were doing the original holes for the blank lure, I said on this belly hook you go a little deeper, and this is why, because this end of the loop goes over the wire and sticks out that, and it just makes it less work with the hand tool later on. So in order to clip this in, I have a very simple I just tug it down tight, and if you can, make it cross a little bit. Don't know if I can do that right now. Okay, it's crossed a tiny little bit. So you put that in place, and what tends to happen is you still have to dig out a little bit around here, maybe the edges here. So that's fitting pretty darn good on that side. So then I do kind of what I did on the other side. I install it into the other side of the lure, and I do the same thing. I may have to dig it out here, I may have to dig it along the edges here, and ultimately I'm going to put the two halves together. This is not a Five Guys sandwich, but certainly a guy sandwich, and I see how it fits. Now, because it fits perfectly here, the next step I'm going to take is I'm going to glue both halves together, and I'm going to put some clamps on here. But also, one of the key things that I've done kind of off camera is made sure that these loops fit properly. Now, you see how that loop fits nicely in the center of the tail? That didn't happen by accident. So I've had to adjust that tail angle a little bit. This loop right now, you can see it's off angle. So I'm going to have to figure out why, and I'm going to have to fix that. So not to worry. So after adjusting the stainless steel wire, I've got it now so it can be centered. So I wanted to mention also one thing about, we're coming up very close to the pouring of the lead. So one important thing is, as you pour the lead, of course, it's going to start solidifying. So you'll have to, of course, plug up these holes to make sure the lead doesn't get away on you. But as you pour the lead and it fills up higher and higher, it's going to naturally go into this area. And with any luck, you're going to get a whole bunch of lead around this joint, and possibly this joint. So when you're actually pouring it, though, you'll fill it halfway up, and then you'll slosh it back and forth, and the lead will be forced to kind of go in here, and it'll hit the cold stainless steel wire, and that's the way you make sure that lead gets in there, because that's going to really freeze this. Both connections. This one sometimes doesn't get as much lead, but bear in mind also that after we're done the lead, we're going to dribble 5-minute epoxy down into this area. So if there's lead around here, that 5-minute epoxy there, and for the tail, that 5-minute epoxy is going to make a seal. And I use Gorilla 5-minute epoxy, and it is my favorite epoxy. It's actually the most expensive epoxy I use as well, because it gives you a time to fix things. So if a 5-minute epoxy hardens in 5 minutes, but it's not real hard. Within 24 hours, if you've got a bit of a spill, you can cut it off with a razor knife, and within 2 days, you can actually sand it. So that's why I like Gorilla 5-minute epoxy. It gives me time to fix things, and it's very stable and extremely strong when it does finally harden. It could take probably 2 weeks until it finally hardens as much as it's going to.